"Miss, this range is for residents, real residents," the HOA president sneered, his voice bouncing off the concrete bays. Laughter rippled behind him. My palms were dry, my breath steady. The morning smelled like gun oil and cut grass, a storm pressing somewhere past the pines. I lifted the club-issued pistol, found my sight picture, rode the trigger wall, and let the first shot break like a whisper. The bullseye puckered dead center. Silence. Then the mutters. Then the excuses. "Wind," someone said, though the air was still. "Beginner's luck," said another, though my grip hadn't moved. The HOA line, khakis, polos, smug, stared at me like I'd crashed a country club wedding in thrift store shoes. "Where are you watching from tonight? Have you ever been told you don't belong, then proved it in one clean moment?" I holstered, locked the slide, cleared the bay. "Open practice is posted," I said, "even for quiet neighbors." The president, Brock Lennox, beard trimmed by a ruler, smiled with a mouth that never touched his eyes. "We'll see how long that lasts." He snapped for a volunteer to fetch the target. It arrived like a white flag, a single, perfect hole. Applause from the far lane, just one pair of hands. A gray-haired woman in a faded army sweatshirt nodded to me, like we'd agreed long ago to meet each other here. "Name?" Brock called, pen poised over a violation pad. "Zora Price," I said. My voice carried farther than I felt it should. "I'm the quiet black woman at the end of Magnolia Lane, the one whose mailbox you once called non-compliant because the paint didn't match your newsletter." I packed slow, measured. I could feel the storm rolling closer. Brock's pen scratched. "Noted, Miss Price. We'll be in touch." He didn't realize I'd already been touched by months of HOA harassment, fines for grass height, garbage day timing, a warning about a wreath that dared to be too colorful. He didn't realize I'd kept every letter, every email, every voicemail in a neat, numbered folder. And he had no idea why my hands didn't shake. Because somebody once taught me how not to. I moved into Magnolia Cove for the porches and the pond, for screen doors that sang in summer, for a street where the night smelled like honeysuckle and the morning like fresh coffee. I thought I was buying peace. I thought the HOA fee was just the cost of mowing common areas, keeping the pool clean, restaining the gazebo. I was wrong. I bought a gate with a smile. I'm Zora, 37, an accountant by day, a voice that rarely carries. I grew up on the South Side, where my grandma taught me that quiet is not weakness, it's choice. Choose when to speak, she'd say, and have a reason. I put myself through night school, married young, buried earlier than anyone should. My husband, Dion, was Army. He loved sunlight, jazz on vinyl, and the way I could balance a checkbook down to the penny. He took me to a public range once, said, "It's not about looking tough, it's about breathing." We never talked about fear, we talked about focus. After he died, I stopped talking much at all. Magnolia Cove looked soft enough to hold the ache. Instead, it sharpened it. The letters started week 2. A fine for leaving my city trash can visible for 17 minutes after pickup. A warning for a welcome mat that said "come as you are" because, wait for it was overly casual. When I planted marigolds, they wrote that orange clashed with the neighborhood palette. I laughed the first time. I paid the second time. By the 5th, I was photographing everything, time-stamping every walk from curb to garage. I logged, I cataloged, I pretended it didn't get under my skin. Then they touched the last thing that felt like mine, a framed photo of Dion on our porch. In a compliance check, a board member accidentally knocked it off the side table. The glass shattered. They apologized like people apologize to glassware. That night, I drove to the Elite Shooters Bay that the HOA leases 2 mornings a week, their community sporting amenity. I stood, in lane 7, with a loaner pistol and a pulse I could hear in my ears. "Breathe on the exhale," Dion used to say. "Don't rush what the wind will carry." I didn't rush. And that's how I met Brock's smile. The first clash wasn't loud. It was precise. A week before the range, I got a notice that my porch light was non-standard brightness. They wanted a $150 fine and a $300 approved fixture from a vendor they just happened to recommend. The letterhead smelled like cologne and printer toner. I wrote back with measurements. Lumens, Kelvin, photos at dusk, time-stamped. I attached the community guidelines they themselves had emailed. Within limits, I said. No fee owed. They replied with a threat to suspend my pool access. Garrett, which the neighborhood group chat shortened to LKG. She was vice president of the HOA and self-anointed sheriff of shrubs. She cornered me at the mailbox wearing tennis whites, sunglasses big enough to count as shade. Zora, she said, smiling like a dare. I heard you're struggling with compliance. We have standards, dear. I have documentation, I said, holding up the binder I'd started to carry. She didn't look at it. She looked through it. We also have a spirit of the covenant. It's about cohesion, uniformity. Some items are interpretive. Interpretive, I repeated, and my voice didn't shake because I had chosen that. Like knocking over a military memorial photo and calling it an oops? Her smile thinned. Accidents happen. Patterns happen too. Across the street, Brock watched like a lifeguard judging a swimming lesson. He liked to observe. He liked to tally. That's when they introduced the range. Community Safety Initiative, they called it. A quarterly marksmanship day for residents who passed the orientation. Lorraine announced it online with a photo of 3 white men in fitted polos holding designer ear protection. I RSVP'd anyway. No comment, no emoji. She hearted my response as if I'd been funny. Orientation morning. Brock explained the rules like a judge explained sentencing. Slow, heavy, deliberate. This is a premium privilege, he said. We require discipline and membership in good standing. What defines good standing? I asked. You'll know it when you see it, he said. At the firing line, Lorraine performed concern. Be careful, dear. Recoil can be scary for newcomers. She wanted an audience. She got one. I stepped forward, found my posture, felt the weight and the balance, the smell of CLP and paper targets. Somewhere. The storm grumbled. I pressed the trigger. Bullseye. And that was the end of their first story about me and the start of mine, about them. The next packet arrived thick as a magazine. Cumulative violations and corrective pathway. They had bullet-pointed my life. A garden flag deemed expressive messaging. An Adirondack chair protruding 6 inches beyond an invisible porch plane. Non-conforming curtains. Because my linen shears were cream, not bone. Total fines. $3,175. Suspension threatened. Clubhouse, gym, range, pool. The word range glowed with their pettiness. I read it with a pen in hand, cross-referencing line by line, page by page. Their covenant, that word trying so hard to be scripture, had been amended without a vote, I noticed. Dates didn't align. A fee schedule updated mid-year without proper notice. I flagged it in yellow. I printed the email announcing no bylaw changes this quarter and clipped it to the page. At dusk, the neighborhood Facebook group cooked. We must protect standards. If we let one person deviate, where does it stop? Someone posted a blurry photo of me at the range with a caption, "Not the vibe Magnolia wants." The comments collected like gnats. I turned notifications off. I turned jazz on. Miles Davis can make a kitchen feel like a sanctuary. The next morning, my tires had bite marks from roofing nails. I crouched beside the front left, fingers finding the head of a nail pressed in just enough to deflate me an hour after I drove away. In the gutter, I found 2 more. I slid them into a plastic bag. Evidence. My binder grew a new tab. Safety. Across the street, Lorraine waved her coffee like we were sharing a sunrise. Tough luck, she called. It's a pattern, I called back. My voice was gentle. That made her laugh. Brock stopped by that afternoon with a courtesy warning and a clipboard. He stood on my porch with his shoes exactly at the seam where the welcome mat used to lie. His gaze went to the side table, the photo I had framed again. He didn't touch it. He didn't have to. Threats could. Be silent. We've scheduled a board hearing, he said. Thursday. If you want any hope of leniency. Do you know the difference? I asked. Between a rule and a law? He blinked. We enforce the rules. I enforce records, I said, tapping the binder. We'll both bring our weapons. He smiled. See you Thursday. I smiled back because the sky had finally broken and rain began to drum the porch. My kind of weather, my kind of rhythm. They thought the range was my little rebellion. They hadn't met my math, I won't lie. The night before the hearing, I wanted to pack a bag. There's a special kind of tired you feel when you are both the target and the archivist. When you hold your breath through small humiliations because you know the big thing is coming, and you need your oxygen for that. I sat at the kitchen table, binder open, pages fanned like a fragile bird. I traced Dion's handwriting in the margins of an old grocery list. Peaches ripe, coffee dark. I could hear him teasing me for alphabetizing the pantry, then kissing my forehead, saying he liked my order because life was chaos enough. I missed the weight of his hand on my shoulder. I missed the easy way he made space in a room for me without moving a single chair. The storm had passed. The air felt scrubbed. A train moaned in the distance like memory. Pick your fight, Z, he used to say, and when you pick it, finish it. I asked myself the questions I always ask my viewers. Where are you watching from? Have you ever fought a petty war because something bigger hid underneath it? I knew this wasn't about curtains. It was about the HOA's money, covenants and community enhancements, and vendors with relationships that sounded like handshakes made in golf carts at dusk. My spreadsheets told a story their newsletters didn't. I'd pulled the public filings. I'd traced checks written to a landscape company owned by the president's brother-in-law. I'd mapped dates and votes and emergency sessions where quorum was suspiciously convenient. Still, doubt crept in. Maybe I was seeing patterns because I needed them. Maybe the nails were just nails. Maybe the group chat was just bored. I went to the closet. I took down the range bag I hadn't opened in years. Inside, Eye Pro, Ear Pro. A small folded note from Dion. Breathe between the beats. I breathed between the beats. Then I packed a different bag. Binder, receipts, photos, and tucked into the front sleeve, something most HOAs hate more than wildflower lawns. A copy of state statutes on nonprofit boards, conflict of interest, discrimination. I slept 3 hours. I dreamed of a firing line and a board table. In both, there were targets only I could see. The morning came. I ironed my navy dress. I buttered toast I didn't taste. I whispered to the empty room, pick it, finish it. And I walked to the clubhouse. The hearing room felt like a dentist's office, neutral art, neutral carpet, a bowl of stale mints daring you to feel welcome. A long oak table divided us. On one side, Brock and Lorraine, and 3 directors who wore their titles like medals. On the other, a chair marked resident. I sat down. My chair wobbled on one leg. Of course it did. Brock began. Miss Price, we've documented serial non-compliance. Before we start, I said, I'd like to record the session. My phone sat quiet, camera down. He frowned. Board proceedings are confidential. Not according to the bylaws, page 14. Subsection C, I said, flipping to a tab. Open to concerned residents with notice. He leaned back. We'll allow a summary. Now, your violations. Lorraine slid glossy photos across the table. My porch, my curtains, my flag on Memorial Day. This is about cohesion, she said. You seem uninterested in our community's look. Obsessed with it, actually, I said, and pushed a stack of my own photos into the middle timestamps, measurements, side-by-sides of neighbors with similar violations who'd never received letters. All white. All unbothered. Lorraine's mouth pinched. We don't see race here. That's the problem, I said softly. The meeting tilted then. Brock's jaw tightened. Miss Price, your tone. My evidence, I said, and slid the spreadsheet across. Vendor payments, dates, vote records. And this, I added, laying down an email I'd pulled through a public FOIA request from the county permitting office. An HOA letter urging expedited approval for a private contractor at the range owned by Brock's closest donor. Lorraine gathered the papers like they were crumbs. "We can adjourn," she said, "if you're feeling overwhelmed." "I'm fine," I said. "But you may not be," Brock snapped. "Enough. Effective immediately, Miss Price. Your access to all amenities is suspended for 90 days. Further, you are fined." "For attending a posted open practice?" I asked. "For hostility," he said. I looked at the camera on the ceiling. Red light, steady. I looked at the board secretary's laptop. Recording software open. I looked at the door. It opened. 2 men stepped in. The first wore a county badge. Code enforcement. The second carried a plain briefcase and a quiet suit. Attorney General's office. Civil Rights Division. Behind them, the gray-haired woman from the Range Army sweatshirt nodded to me. She mouthed, "Finish it." Brock stood. "We're in a private session." "Not anymore," the AG rep said. "We've received multiple complaints, disparate enforcement, conflicts of interest, and a credible allegation about tampering at a community event." Lorraine laughed, brittle. "From who?" The woman stepped forward. "My name is Colonel May Ellis, retired. And you kept laughing at the wrong neighbor. They didn't arrest anyone. That's not how real life works. What they did was better." The AG rep asked for copies. The code enforcement officer took photos. Colonel Ellis sat beside me like a witness at a baptism. I slid my binder across the table, sure hands, steady breath. Brock tried to bluster, "This is outrageous." And Lorraine tried to charm, "We're all just neighbors, surely we can." But the room had shifted. The storm had finally broken inside the clubhouse. "Miss Price," the AG rep said, "we'll need formal statements, and we'll likely audit the association's finances." Brock scoffed. "Do you people understand we're volunteers? Do you understand your fiduciaries?" the AG rep asked back. I felt something unclench in my chest. Not victory. Not yet. But the promise of it. Colonel Ellis squeezed my elbow. "You shoot like someone taught you to breathe through chaos," she said quietly. "My husband," I said. "Army." She nodded. "Mine too, I'm sorry." We shared the kind of silence only people who folded flags understand. Then she said, "If you want allies, you've got them. You're not the only one who's been singled out." After they left, after the board recessed in a huddle that looked like a flock losing formation, I walked out into sunlight. The air tasted like cut lemons. Kids wheeled by on bikes. A dog barked. It was a beautiful day to decide who I was going to be. I could sell. I could move. I could leave them to their pond and their gazebo and their curated boniness. Or I could stay and bring light. I chose the second. Not because I love a fight, because I love an ending that teaches something. At dusk, I knocked on doors. Colonel Ellis introduced me in a text thread of people who are tired. A Filipino nurse who'd been cited for drying a uniform on a back deck line. A Latino homeowner told his truck looked commercial. A white single mom slapped with a noise violation when her toddler's birthday ran 10 minutes past 7. Patterns. Everywhere. Patterns. We met in my living room with coffee and Post-its and a whiteboard that still had my meal prep plan on it. We built a timeline. We triangulated the fines against voting seasons and vendor contracts and who played golf with whom. By midnight, we had a plan. Step 1. File formal complaints together. Step 2. Call for a special meeting by the book. Step 3. Prepare for the range event they'd converted into a spectacle. Because Brock had a new flyer up already. Community exhibition. HOA champion versus resident challenger. He didn't name me. He didn't have to. "You ready?" Colonel Ellis asked. I looked at my hands. "Steady. When I pick it," I said, "I finish it." And I had one more thing to finish. Their story about who belonged. If you've never prepped for a fight that is part courtroom, part carnival, it looks like this. Daylight spreadsheets, midnight drills. Daylight. We combed bank statements. Invoices from a landscaping company with initials that matched the president's brother-in-law, a consulting fee to an LLC registered to Lorraine's sister. We collected testimonies, dates, times, comparators, neighbors with the same violations who were never cited. We highlighted statutes. We drafted our call for a special election to recall the board clean, lawful, boring, on purpose. Midnight, range work. Not because I needed to flex, because I needed to be undeniable. If they were going to weaponize the community range to humiliate me, I would turn it into a lesson. Jose Marine vet, former range instructor, friend of Colonel Ellis, met me after closing. He moved like still water. He said little. He adjusted my stance by millimeters, checked my wrist alignment, reset my breath cadence under stress. "They'll try to distract you," he said. "People talk, cameras flash. You hear only the front sight. I shot strings at varied distances. I practiced malfunctions. Someone flicked a flashlight in my peripheral vision to simulate cheap tricks. I smiled without smiling. Somewhere, Dion's voice told me to measure the wind, even when there isn't any. At home, I built a deck. Not the wooden kind, the PowerPoint kind. Slides that told a story without adjectives, graphs that didn't shout, a timeline that made quiet look like thunder. I rehearsed in my living room like I was auditioning for a role I already held. Neighbor, woman, witness. The day before the exhibition, the AG office emailed. They'd opened a formal investigation. Code enforcement issued a temporary pause on new fines until the audit concluded. Small wins, necessary wins. Brock posted a video in the community group. "Let's have a little fun tomorrow." He stood at the range in a branded polo, calling it a friendly demonstration. He mentioned safety 6 times and integrity 0 times. The comments pumped him up. "Show her who we are, Brock. Standards matter." I put my phone face down and listened to rain in my earbuds, 1 hour of recorded storm. That sound clears my head like running. Then I sharpened my last piece. A surprise. A guest. Someone they respected more than me. Someone they'd have to hear. I called Dion's old commanding officer. He picked up on the second ring. "Price? I wondered when you'd ring. Sir, I need help turning petty into instructive." "Good," he said. "That's my favorite conversion." The crowd that showed for the exhibition was bigger than a summer concert. Golf carts lined the lane. People dressed like they were going to both church and CrossFit. Brock worked the line like a politician, shaking hands he considered equals. Lorraine wore a visor that could shade an acre. They'd set up a scoreboard on a flat screen. 2 lanes, same club pistols. 20 shots each. "For community pride," the flyer said. I stepped up and secured my ear pro. The world narrowed to the hum inside my head. The sun sat high, glaring off the backstops. The air smelled like sunscreen and something fake lemon. Brock started with a speech. "We celebrate neighbors today," he said. "We honor safety." He winked. People laughed. My chest stayed quiet. Colonel Ellis stood behind the yellow line with Jose and 10 neighbors I now called team. They looked regular. That is a kind of power. We flipped a coin. He won. "Ladies first," he smirked, and gestured to my lane. "Thank you," I said, and meant it. I like to go first. It makes my story the ruler. 20 shots can be a lifetime, or it can be 20 breaths you stack like bricks. I stacked them. I shot 4 strings of 5, slow, measured, exactly as trained. I corrected for a subtle left drift from a front sight that looked accidentally filed. I called my shots under my breath. High left, 8th ring, correct. My target came back pocked like a constellation charted by a perfectionist. Applause. Not grudging. Curious. Brock took his lane. He is not a bad shooter. His grip was textbook, his trigger press clean. But he plays to cameras, and cameras play back. He turned a hair toward the cheering and lost a hair off his group. The first tally had me ahead. By 2. Small, but not ignorable. Then came the first strike, the one we planned. Jose raised his hand like a student. Safety check, he said, loud enough for the volunteers to freeze. He pointed to the identical pistols on each lane, gestured to the rangemaster. Barrels. Sights. The rangemaster, brought in by the AG office as a neutral, ran a quick inspection and stopped. He turned the front sight on Brock's pistol with a pinky and showed the camera a loose set screw. "This could drift 0, he said. "Unintentional or not, it's unsafe." The room, because it felt like a room, shifted. The cameras caught Lorraine's flinch. They caught Brock's jaw. We paused. The rangemaster swapped both pistols for sealed, inspected replacements. He announced it into the microphone with the slow gravity of a sentence. When we restarted, Brock's smile had cracks. I finished with a score that beat most folks on their best day. He finished 1 ring behind. Not a blowout, but a bruise they couldn't pretend not to feel. And it was only the morning. The twist didn't happen at the line. It happened under a tent. After the exhibition, the board held a Q&A about community values. They sat on folding chairs like a panel at a school fair. Lorraine's visor coded for benevolence. Brock's polo did the talking. I took a seat in the front row with my binder and a pen I didn't need but liked to hold. A neighbor asked about fines. Another asked about paint colors. Then an older man stood, Mr. Whitaker, HOAs from 3 addresses back. "What happened to the playground fund?" he asked. "It was budgeted last year." Lorraine beamed. "In progress." I raised my hand. "With what vendor?" She hesitated. "We're in negotiations." "With Magnolia Enhancement Partners LLC?" I said. "Registered to your sister, per the state's business database?" A murmur traveled like wind. "You're out of order," Brock said. "We can reorder," I replied, and handed the microphone because someone had finally given me one to the AG rep who'd arrived with 2 auditors. They plugged a laptop into the scoreboard screen. A spreadsheet appeared. Payments, names, checks, signatures. A neat river of numbers that told a story no newsletter ever would. The AG rep spoke in sentences that landed like nails in joists. Conflicts of interest, bylaw violations, disparate enforcement patterns targeting a protected class. He clicked to a slide of screenshots from the group chat. Comments about me that used words like, "our look," and "tone it down." He clicked to an email from Brock to a vendor promising preferential treatment at the range. Then came the witness we'd saved for last. The commanding officer, Dion's former CO, stepped up in civvies and a soft voice that filled the tent. "I knew Zora's husband," he said. "He taught soldiers how to breathe through chaos. He used to say, 'Integrity is doing what's right when nobody's recording.' Well, folks, somebody recorded." He nodded to Colonel Ellis, who cued the clubhouse security footage obtained legally by code enforcement. Lorraine's sister in the equipment room with a toolkit, adjusting front sights. The date stamp matched the morning of my first bullseye. The tent exhaled as one. Some people looked away. Some looked at me, and then at themselves. Brock stood, color rising. "This is a witch hunt." "It's an audit," the AG rep said. "Elections will be held. Today." People whispered. People texted. People, for once, looked at the bylaws, printed on the back of the handouts. And then someone I didn't expect, Mr. Whitaker, started a slow clap, the kind that is half approval, half relief. He wasn't clapping for me. He was clapping because the room had finally gotten honest. Brock tried to gavel a meeting that didn't require a gavel. Lorraine smiled like she could still talk the sun into setting later. And I asked one question that finally broke their last story. "How much of this," I said into the mic, "was really about paint? Justice doesn't always wear handcuffs. Sometimes it wears name tags." By sunset, the community had voted to suspend the board pending the AG's findings and to seat an interim committee to stabilize operations. It wasn't dramatic. It was lines on paper and hands in the air and signatures that held. But when the interim chair read the tally, "Motion carries," the pond geese honked like they'd been waiting. Brock resigned for the good of the neighborhood. Lorraine did not resign. She stepped aside. The vendor contracts were frozen. The fines were paused, then voided where improper. Refunds were issued with checks that cleared. The range got new locks and a calendar that didn't say members only when it meant friends of the board. The safety officer, real one, Certified wrote a policy in plain English. The AG filed a civil suit for discrimination and misuse of funds. Insurance companies got alert. Brock's lawyer stopped smiling. Lorraine's visor disappeared. As for me, I filed my own complaint narrow, surgical about selective enforcement and harassment. I did not ask for a settlement check. I asked for two things: a public apology at the next community meeting and the establishment of a scholarship in Dion's name for veterans in the county pursuing trade certifications. I asked that a portion of future HOA violation revenue be redirected into it so punishment would become investment. The interim committee voted yes. The AG wrote it into a consent agreement so yes would stay yes after the cameras left. At the next meeting, Lorraine read an apology. It was written by a lawyer, but her voice cracked on harm. Brock didn't attend. Rumor said he'd moved to a condo with no dues. The new treasurer read out the scholarship terms. Colonel Ellis shook my hand like we'd just passed a baton neither of us wanted to drop. And then came the range one more time, not for score. For naming. They unveiled a small plaque on Lane 7. The Dayon Price Fundamentals Bay. Underneath, in small letters, breathe between the beats. Neighbors clapped. Kids asked questions. A boy with noise-canceling headphones touched the metal gently like it might sing. We shot that day like a community, side by side. No exhibition, no scoreboard, just paper, holes, breath. If you've ever been underestimated, you know the temptation to rub a win in. I didn't. I let the win be a lesson, and the lesson be a bridge. That is a kind of revenge, too, one that grows something after it burns nonsense down. As the sun slid low, the air smelled like cut grass again. The mail came on time. My porch light glowed at the legal lumen. My curtains moved in the legal breeze. And my hand stayed steady because I choose when to shake. You want a neat bow. I can hear you asking through the screen, was that the end? Do HOAs stop being petty? Do people stop being themselves because they signed an apology? Number. But a story can change a room. And a room can change a neighborhood. And a neighborhood can decide who it is in writing. The AG's suit ended in a consent decree. The association completed ethics training, rewrote the bylaws with the state's model language, and instituted blind review on violations photos with addresses masked, decision panels mixed and rotated. Vendor contracts went to open bid. Sunlight, everywhere sunlight. The scholarship fund received its first contributions, the board's stipends, Lorraine's consulting reimbursement, and a surprise check from the landscaping company trying to keep a contract by doing something right. 2 vets started HVAC school because a neighborhood learned how to be one. As for me, I still keep the binder, not because I'm waiting for the other shoe. Because record keeping is love, for truth, for memory, for the version of ourselves that chooses integrity on a Tuesday afternoon when nobody's watching. I run a weekly fundamentals class at the range. We call it 7 breaths. We start with posture, we end with T. Sometimes Colonel Ellis tells new shooters stories about fear. Sometimes Jose says nothing at all and it teaches more. Lorraine walks her dog past my house in the mornings. She nods. She doesn't cross the street anymore. We're not friends, we're neighbors. It's enough. On quiet nights, I sit on the porch and listen to the train that moves through town like a faraway heartbeat. I think about the day they laughed, and the shot that shut them up, and how the real aim was never their mouths, it was our rules. If you're watching from a place where you've been told to shrink, breathe. Stack your steps. Build your binder, whatever binder is for you. Ask for allies. Tell the truth in numbers and names. When you pick it, finish it. I touch the plaque on my way into the bay, Dion's name cool under my fingers. Between the beats, I whisper. And the air in my chest obeys. The paper downrange waits patient and blank. I draw, sight, exhale, another clean hole. And somewhere, I like to think, a man who loved sunlight and jazz claps once and says, "There you are."